The desert sun beat down mercilessly on the small trading post outside Tucson, Arizona. In the summer of 1885, Sarah Martinez wiped the sweat from her brow as she arranged goods on the wooden shelves of her family's store. At 23, she had inherited both her father's business sense and her Apache mother's quiet strength. The combination made her a formidable woman in a territory where survival demanded nothing less. Sarah's mixed heritage had always been a source of tension in the community. Her father, Miguel Martinez, had been a respected Mexican trader who fell in love with running deer, an Apache woman from the Chiricahua Band. Their marriage had scandalized the small frontier community, but Miguel's determination and running deer's gentle nature had gradually won over most of the neighbors. When Apache raids increased in the area, however, old prejudices resurged like wildfire. The bell above the store's entrance jangled as three dusty cowboys entered. Sarah recognized them immediately: Jake Morrison, Pete Collins, and Tom Bradley. They worked for the largest ranch in the area and had never hidden their disdain for anyone with Apache blood. Jake's cold blue eyes fixed on Sarah with barely concealed hostility. "Well, well," Jake drawled, removing his hat and running dirty fingers through his greasy hair. "If it isn't our local Apache princess. Business must be good, selling supplies to your savage relatives for their raiding parties." Sarah's jaw tightened, but she kept her voice steady. "Gentlemen, what can I help you with today? We have fresh tobacco, ammunition, and preserved goods." Pete stepped closer to the counter, his hand resting on his gun belt. "Maybe we don't want to buy anything from someone who might be passing information to the hostiles. Word is there's been Apache scouts seen near the old canyon trail. You wouldn't know anything about that, would you?" The accusation hung in the air like smoke from a campfire. Sarah had indeed seen Apache scouts, but they were peaceful members of her mother's distant family who occasionally visited to trade. She had no intention of explaining this to these men, knowing they wouldn't believe her anyway. "I run a legitimate business," Sarah replied firmly. "I serve customers who pay honest money for goods. If you're not here to buy something, I'll have to ask you to leave." Tom laughed harshly. Mighty bold words for a half-breed squaw. "Maybe we should teach you some manners about talking back to white men." Before Sarah could respond, the sound of approaching hoofbeats thundered outside. Through the dusty window, she could see a group of Apache warriors riding hard toward the trading post. Her heart sank as she recognized the war paint and the grim expressions on their faces. These weren't her peaceful relatives. These were warriors from Geronimo's band, and they looked like they were in pursuit of something or someone. Jake's hand flew to his gun. "I knew it! She's been working with them all along. This is a trap." The Apache warriors pulled up outside the trading post in a cloud of dust. Their leader, a fierce-looking man with scars across his chest, dismounted and approached the door. Sarah recognized him as Nate, one of Geronimo's most trusted war chiefs. Her blood ran cold as she realized the gravity of the situation. "Everyone stay calm," Sarah whispered urgently. "Let me handle this." But Jake was already drawing his weapon. "Like hell we will. We're not going to be massacred by your Apache friends." The confrontation erupted into chaos as Jake fired a warning shot into the ceiling. The Apache warriors immediately raised their rifles, and Pete and Tom dove behind the store's makeshift barricade of flour sacks. Sarah found herself caught in the middle of a powder keg that was about to explode. Nate called out in Apache, his voice carrying the authority of a seasoned war leader. Sarah understood every word. He was demanding the return of his daughter, who had been taken by white soldiers 3 days ago. He believed Sarah, with her connections to both communities, might know where the girl was being held. "What's he saying?" Jake demanded, his gun trained on the door. Sarah's mind raced. If she told the truth, these cowboys would assume she was collaborating with the Apache. If she lied, Nate would know, and the situation would escalate beyond control. The missing Apache girl was probably being held at the cavalry fort 30 miles east. But revealing that information would put everyone at risk. "He wants to trade horses for supplies," Sarah lied. Hoping to buy time, Tom spat tobacco juice onto the floor. "Don't believe her for a second. She's probably telling him how many of us are in here and where we're positioned." Outside, the Apache warriors were growing impatient. Nate called out again, this time with an edge of anger in his voice. He gave Sarah 1 minute to provide information about his daughter's whereabouts, or they would assume she was complicit in the girl's capture. Sarah's palms were sweating as she tried to think of a solution that wouldn't end in bloodshed. Her mother's people and her father's adopted country were once again on opposite sides of a conflict that seemed to have no peaceful resolution. The cowboys behind her were ready to fight to the death, and the Apache warriors outside were equally determined to recover the missing girl. The seconds ticked by like hours. Sarah could hear her own heartbeat thundering in her ears as she weighed her options. She could try to slip out the back and escape, leaving the cowboys to face the Apache alone. She could tell Nate the truth about the cavalry fort and hope the warriors would leave peacefully. Or she could attempt to negotiate a peaceful resolution that might satisfy both sides. A bead of sweat rolled down her face as she made her decision. "Nate," she called out in Apache, "I will speak with you alone. Send your warriors back 50 paces, and I will come outside." "What did you just tell them?" Jake's voice was sharp with suspicion and fear. "I told them I would negotiate," Sarah replied. "But you need to put your guns down, or this will end badly for all of us." Pete laughed bitterly. "Put our guns down? Lady, you must think we're as stupid as we think you are treacherous. The minute we lower our weapons, those savages will fill us full of arrows." The standoff continued as the heat outside intensified. Sarah could smell the fierce sweat of the men behind her, and see the dust motes dancing in the shafts of sunlight streaming through the windows. Everything about this moment felt surreal, as if she were watching someone else's life unfold rather than living her own desperate reality. Suddenly, one of the Apache horses whinnied nervously and shied away from something approaching from the west. Sarah strained to see what had spooked the animal and caught sight of a lone rider moving steadily toward the trading post. The figure was still too far away to identify, but something about the way the person sat in the saddle suggested confidence and authority. Nate had noticed the approaching rider as well. He barked orders to his warriors, who immediately repositioned themselves to face this new potential threat. The tension in the air became almost unbearable as everyone waited to see whether the newcomer would tip the scales toward peace or war. Sarah pressed her face against the window glass, trying to get a better look at the rider. Whoever it was, they were moving at a steady pace rather than charging, which suggested they weren't bringing immediate reinforcements for either side. This could be her chance to find a peaceful solution, or it could be the spark that ignited a bloodbath. "Someone's coming," she announced quietly. Jake cursed under his breath. "A friend of yours, no doubt. Probably bringing more Apache reinforcements." But Sarah had a different feeling about the approaching figure. Something familiar about the silhouette triggered a memory she couldn't quite place. As the rider drew closer, she began to make out more details: a weathered hat, a distinctive way of holding the reins, a bearing that spoke of years in law enforcement. Her heart skipped a beat as recognition dawned. It was Samuel Henderson, the former sheriff who had left town 6 months ago under mysterious circumstances. Sam had always been fair in his dealings with both the Apache and the Mexican families in the area. Earning respect from communities that rarely trusted lawmen, the question was whether Sam's arrival would help defuse the situation or make it infinitely more complicated. Sarah held her breath as the retired sheriff rode steadily toward what might become his final confrontation. Samuel Henderson reined in his horse about 30 yards from the tense scene, close enough to clearly assess the situation but far enough to avoid triggering any nervous fingers on triggers. The former sheriff was 52 years old, with steel-gray hair and eyes that had seen too much violence in his 25 years of law enforcement. The deep lines around those eyes spoke of hard decisions made in impossible circumstances. Sam had been riding through the area on his way to California, where his sister lived with her family. After leaving his sheriff's badge behind, he had hoped to find peace in the quieter life of ranch work and family visits. But peace seemed to have a way of eluding him, especially when innocent people were caught in the crossfire of old hatreds. He recognized the Apache war chief immediately. Nate had a reputation as a fair but implacable leader who would go to any lengths to protect his people. Sam had negotiated with him twice during his years as sheriff, and both times they had managed to reach agreements that prevented bloodshed. The key with Nate was respect and direct honesty. Any hint of deception or condescension would end negotiations permanently. The three cowboys inside the trading post were another matter entirely. Sam knew their type well, men who saw Apache raids as justification for hatred toward anyone with native blood, regardless of their actual involvement in hostilities. They were dangerous not because they were evil, but because their fear made them unpredictable and their prejudice made them unreasonable. Sarah Martinez was the wild card in this situation. Sam had always respected her father Miguel, who had been a straight dealer and a man of his word. Sarah's Apache heritage would make the cowboys suspicious of anything she said or did, but it might also give her credibility with Nate if she could communicate his real intentions. Sam dismounted slowly, keeping his hands visible and away from his weapons. He carried a rifle in his saddle scabbard and a Colt revolver on his hip, but his body language conveyed caution rather than aggression. Years of law enforcement had taught him that the first person to appear threatening usually ended up as the first casualty. Nate, Sam called out in the limited Apache he had learned during his years as sheriff. I am Samuel Henderson. We have spoken before in peace. May we speak again in peace? The war chief studied the former sheriff for a long moment before responding in accented but clear English. Samuel Henderson, you are no longer the law in this place. Why do you come here? I come because I see a situation that may end in unnecessary death, Sam replied honestly. I believe you are a man who prefers to achieve his goals without killing innocent people. I believe the same about myself. Perhaps we can find a way to avoid bloodshed. Inside the trading post, Jake was growing increasingly agitated. Don't listen to him, he shouted through the window. Henderson's always been soft on the Apache. He's probably working with them now. Sam ignored the outburst and kept his attention focused on Nate. Tell me what you seek here, and perhaps I can help you find it without violence. Nate's jaw tightened with barely controlled emotion. My daughter, Little Dove, was taken 3 days ago by blue-coat soldiers. She is 12 summers old and has done no wrong to any white person. I have come to ask Sarah Martinez if she knows where the soldiers have taken her. The missing girl changed everything. Sam understood immediately why Nate was willing to risk a confrontation with armed whites. In Apache culture, the protection of children was paramount, and a father who failed to recover his captured daughter would never forgive himself. This wasn't about raiding or territorial disputes. This was about a parent's desperate love for his child. Sarah, Sam called toward the trading post. Can you come outside so we can discuss this situation? I give you my word that you will be safe. The door opened cautiously and Sarah emerged with her hands visible. The cowboys inside were clearly unhappy about her leaving, but they didn't try to stop her. She walked slowly toward Sam and Nate, her face showing the strain of being caught between two worlds that often seemed determined to destroy each other. Sheriff Henderson? Sarah said quietly. I mean, Mr. Henderson. I didn't expect to see you again. Life has a way of bringing us where we need to be, Sam replied. Nate tells me his daughter has been taken by soldiers. Do you know anything about this? Sarah nodded reluctantly. Little Dove was taken by a cavalry patrol led by Lieutenant Morrison. She was gathering medicinal plants near Willow Creek when they found her. The lieutenant claimed she was scouting for raiding parties, but anyone who knows Little Dove would know that's impossible. She's just a child who loves to learn about healing herbs from her grandmother. Nate's face darkened with anger. Morrison, the yellow-haired soldier with the crooked teeth. He has taken Apache children before and claimed they were warriors. Where has he taken my daughter? Sam felt a knot forming in his stomach. Lieutenant Morrison was known for his aggressive tactics and his tendency to see potential enemies everywhere. If he had indeed taken a 12-year-old girl as a prisoner of war, it would be a violation of every decent standard of conduct. The problem was that Morrison commanded the garrison at Fort Bravo, 30 miles to the east, and he wasn't known for listening to reason from civilians. She's probably being held at Fort Bravo, Sarah said quietly. But Lieutenant Morrison won't release her just because we ask. He'll claim she's a valuable source of intelligence about Apache movements. Nature's warriors shifted restlessly behind him, clearly ready to ride immediately for the fort. Sam could see the war chief calculating the odds of a successful assault on a fortified position defended by trained soldiers. It would be a bloodbath that would accomplish nothing except getting more people killed, including possibly Little Dove herself. "Nate," Sam said carefully, "a direct attack on Fort Bravo would be suicide for your men and death for your daughter. Morrison would never surrender her if he thought Apache warriors were coming. We need a different approach." "Then what do you suggest, Samuel Henderson?" Nature's voice carried the weight of a father's desperation. "My daughter is in the hands of a man who sees all Apache as enemies to be destroyed. Each day she remains there, she is in greater danger." Sam was quiet for a moment, thinking through the possibilities. Morrison respected military authority and federal law, even if he interpreted both rather loosely. As a civilian, Sam had no official standing to demand the release of prisoners. But there might be another way to approach the problem. "There's a federal marshal named Thomas Garrett who's supposed to be in the area investigating reports of irregular military activities," Sam said slowly. "If we could find him and present evidence that Morrison has illegally detained a non-combatant child, he would have the authority to order her release." Sarah's eyes lit up with hope. "Marshal Garrett was in Tucson 2 days ago. He might still be there or close by." Nate considered this information carefully. How long would it take to find this marshal and bring him here? "Maybe 2 days, if we're lucky," Sam admitted. "I know that's a long time when your daughter is in danger, but it's our best chance of getting her back safely." The war chief's face was a mask of controlled emotion. 2 days might as well be a lifetime when a child's safety was at stake. But he was also experienced enough to recognize that Sam's plan offered the best hope of success without massive casualties. From inside the trading post, Jake's voice rang out again. "Don't believe anything they're telling you, Henderson. This is all a trick to get you to lower your guard. The minute you turn your back, they'll fill you full of arrows." Sam sighed deeply. The cowboys' paranoia was making an already difficult situation nearly impossible. They were so convinced that any negotiation with Apache was treachery that they couldn't see the humanitarian crisis unfolding right in front of them. "Jake, Pete, Tom," Sam called toward the building. "Come out here so we can discuss this like reasonable men." "Go to hell, Henderson." Pete's voice carried a note of hysteria. "We're not falling for this Apache ambush. We'll stay right here until they get tired of waiting and ride away." Nate looked at Sam with something approaching amusement. "Your white brothers do not trust you to make peace." "Some white men fear peace more than they fear war," Sam replied honestly. "They think showing mercy is the same as showing weakness. But you and I both know that the strongest man is often the one who chooses not to fight when he could easily win." The Apache war chief studied the former sheriff's face for a long moment, as if weighing the sincerity of his words. Finally, he nodded slightly. "You speak truth, Samuel Henderson. But my daughter cannot wait while your frightened friends decide whether to trust us. If we cannot find this marshal quickly, I will take my warriors to Fort Bravo and demand her return." "Give me 1 day," Sam requested. "Let me ride to Tucson and find Marshal Garrett. If I can't locate him by tomorrow evening, I'll return here and we'll figure out another approach." Sarah stepped forward. "I'll go with you. I know Tucson better than anyone, and Marshal Garrett might listen more carefully if a local person vouches for the truth of what happened to Little Dove." Nate shook his head firmly. "No, Sarah Martinez has already taken enough risk by speaking truth in this situation. She should stay here where she is safe. You go alone, Samuel Henderson. Bring back this marshal or my warriors, Sam Henderson rode harder than he had in years, pushing his horse across the desert terrain toward Tucson as the sun climbed higher in the merciless sky. Behind him, he left a situation balanced on the edge of violence, with innocent lives hanging in the balance. The approaching dust cloud had turned out to be a cavalry patrol from Fort Bravo, led by none other than Lieutenant Morrison himself. Morrison's arrival had changed everything. The arrogant officer had immediately demanded that Nate and his warriors surrender unconditionally, claiming they were in violation of the reservation boundaries. When Nate explained about his missing daughter, Morrison had laughed coldly and suggested that Apache children were better off in military custody where they could be civilized properly. The confrontation had nearly erupted into shooting when Morrison ordered his men to arrest Sarah Martinez as a suspected Apache collaborator. Only Nate's restraint had prevented a massacre, but Sam knew that restraint wouldn't last long if Little Dove wasn't returned safely to her father. As Sam's horse thundered across the desert, he thought about the 12-year-old girl at the center of this crisis. He had seen Little Dove several times during his years as sheriff, always in the company of her grandmother when they came to trade at the Mexican settlements. The child was quiet and observant, with the kind of intelligence that would make her a valuable member of any community. The idea that Morrison had imprisoned her as a potential threat was both absurd and infuriating. The outskirts of Tucson appeared through the heat shimmer as Sam's horse began to tire. He pushed the animal harder, knowing that every minute's delay could mean the difference between peace and warfare. The town was bustling with afternoon activity as merchants, cowboys, and travelers went about their business. Unaware that a crisis was brewing 30 miles away in the desert, Sam headed straight for the territorial marshal's office, hoping against hope that Thomas Garrett would be there. Marshal Garrett was known as a fair and competent lawman who took his federal authority seriously. He had dealt with irregular military activities before and wouldn't hesitate to confront Morrison if presented with clear evidence of wrongdoing. The marshal's office was a small adobe building near the center of town, with the territorial seal painted on its wooden door. Sam tied his exhausted horse to the hitching post and strode inside, his spurs jangling on the wooden floor. "Marshal Garrett?" Sam called out, but the office was empty except for a young clerk sorting through papers. "Marshal's not here," the clerk said without looking up. "Rode out this morning to investigate some trouble down in Nogales. Won't be back for at least 3 days, maybe longer." Sam's heart sank like a stone dropped in deep water. 3 days was far too long to wait, and Nogales was over 100 miles south. There was no way to reach Garrett and bring him back before the situation at the trading post exploded into violence. "Is there anyone else with federal authority in the area?" Sam asked desperately. "A judge? Another marshal? Anyone who could override a cavalry lieutenant's decisions?" The clerk shrugged. "Judge Martinez is holding court in Phoenix, and Marshal Williams is up in Flagstaff chasing train robbers. Far as I know, Marshal Garrett's the only federal law in this part of the territory right now." Sam felt the weight of failure settling on his shoulders. He had promised Nate he would find federal authority to secure Little Dove's release, but that authority simply wasn't available. The Apache war chief would have no choice but to attempt a rescue mission against Fort Bravo, which would result in deaths on both sides and probably wouldn't save the girl anyway. As he stood in the empty marshal's office, Sam remembered something his old mentor had told him years ago. Sometimes a badge gives you authority, but real authority comes from doing what's right regardless of whether you have a badge or not. The words had seemed like philosophical nonsense at the time, but now they took on new meaning. Sam might not have federal authority, but he still had something that could be just as powerful in the right circumstances: information and connections, built over years of law enforcement. If he couldn't bring official pressure to bear on Morrison, perhaps he could find another way to force the lieutenant's hand. He left the marshal's office and headed for the telegraph office 3 blocks away. The telegraph operator, a thin man named Jerry Walsh, looked up as Sam entered. "Sheriff Henderson," Jerry exclaimed. "Haven't seen you since you turned in your badge. What brings you to town?" "I need to send some urgent telegrams," Sam said grimly, "and I need you to keep them confidential for now." Gary nodded seriously. The telegraph operator had worked with Sam on several cases and trusted the former sheriff's judgment completely. Sam's first telegram went to Colonel Harrison at the Territorial Military Headquarters in Phoenix. Harrison was Morrison's superior officer and a man who took military protocol seriously. The telegram was carefully worded to suggest that Morrison might be exceeding his authority in detaining non-combatant civilians without proper justification. The second telegram went to Samuel's old friend, Captain Roberts, who served as military liaison to the Indian Agency. Roberts had worked extensively with Apache leaders and understood the delicate nature of tribal relations. Sam's message outlined the situation and warned that illegal detention of an Apache child could reignite the warfare that everyone had worked so hard to end. The third telegram was the most important, and Sam composed it very carefully. It went to Morrison himself at Fort Bravo, and it contained information that Sam hoped would change the lieutenant's perspective on the situation. Have evidence that Apache girl Little Dove is granddaughter of Chief Cochise through her mother's line stop her illegal detention. Could be considered act of war by entire Apache Nation stop suggest immediate release to prevent territorial incident stop. Colonel Harrison has been notified of situation stop S. Henderson. The message was a calculated gamble. Little Dove was indeed related to the legendary Chief Cochise, though the relationship was more distant than Sam had implied. But Morrison wouldn't know the exact family connections, and the mention of Colonel Harrison's involvement would make the lieutenant think twice about his actions after sending the telegrams. Sam visited 3 other key people in Tucson who could help apply pressure on Morrison. The first was Father Miguel Santos, a Catholic priest who served as unofficial chaplain to the military garrison and who had significant influence with the soldiers. The second was Judge Parker, a territorial judge who had authority over civilian matters involving military personnel. The third was Maria Sandoval, the wife of a prominent merchant who supplied Fort Bravo, and who had Morrison's ear on logistical matters. Each conversation was carefully crafted to present Morrison's detention of Little Dove in the worst possible light. Sam emphasized the girl's age, her non-combatant status, and the potential for her continued imprisonment to restart the Apache wars that had already cost so many lives on both sides. By late afternoon, Sam had created a web of pressure that would reach Morrison from multiple directions. The lieutenant would hear from his superior officer, from influential civilians, from the military chaplain, and from his supply contractor. The message would be consistent. Releasing Little Dove was the smart military and political decision, while keeping her imprisoned was a career-ending mistake. But Sam knew that pressure from above might not be enough if Morrison was truly determined to keep the Apache girl as his prisoner. The lieutenant had a reputation for stubbornness that sometimes bordered on insubordination. If he decided to dig in his heels, the situation could still explode into violence. As the sun began to set, Sam mounted a fresh horse borrowed from the livery stable and began the long ride back to the trading post. He had done everything he could with the resources available, but he still wasn't sure it would be enough to prevent bloodshed. The desert landscape looked different in the evening light, painted in shades of gold and purple that made even the harsh terrain beautiful. Sam found himself thinking about the cycles of violence and peace that had defined the Arizona Territory for generations. Apache and white settlers had been locked in conflict for so long that many people on both sides couldn't imagine any other relationship, but Sam had seen moments of cooperation and mutual respect between the communities, usually when individual people chose to act with courage and compassion rather than fear and prejudice. Sarah Martinez represented one such bridge between worlds, and Little Dove represented the future. That could be possible if adults could put aside their hatreds long enough to protect innocent children. The lights of the trading post appeared in the distance as Sam approached the scene of the morning's confrontation. He could see campfires from both the Apache warriors and the cavalry patrol, positioned 100 yards apart like opposing armies preparing for battle. The situation looked even more tense than when he had left, and Sam wondered if he was already too late to prevent tragedy. As he rode closer, a figure emerged from the shadows near Sarah's store. It was Nate, walking slowly toward Sam with the measured pace of a man who had made difficult decisions. "Samuel Henderson," the Apache war chief called out as Sam dismounted. "Did you find your marshal?" "No," Sam admitted honestly. "Marshal Garrett is investigating trouble in